Listen up. The night this goes down, a Russian mechanized force rolls out, dead certain they are just running a routine probing assault on a quiet Ukrainian sector. Heavy tanks and armored carriers push through the smoke, expecting contact, but betting their heavy armor and sheer numbers will punch through. What they miss is the terrain ahead. It is a layered kill zone, dialed in by Ukrainian recon drones and rigged with deep minefields, heavy artillery, and Western-supplied armor waiting in ambush. In minutes, the ancient tactic of armor-leading infantry gets shredded. This is modern combat, where FPV drones, cluster munitions, and guided missiles dictate who advances and who burns. Tonight, I will walk you through these relentless assault waves, showing exactly how entire armored columns get boxed in and shattered, and explain why combat crews now call this specific grid sector an absolute graveyard for Russian steel. If you want unfiltered, tactical breakdowns of real kinetic firefights and the brutal politics driving them, stay locked on Military Force. Hit like, share this intel, and subscribe so you never miss our next major frontline update. The initial push here triggered when a light Russian mechanized scout element drove hard toward a fortified Ukrainian defensive line. They pushed up with a lone point tank, trailing multiple troop carriers. Their orders were to probe for tactical weaknesses without sparking a massive firefight. Their advance choked down a tight dirt road hugging a dense tree line. Maneuvering room was zero, and visibility was absolute garbage on both flanks. Tank crews anticipated light contact and a rapid probe of the defensive trenches, pushing ahead in a tight column rather than fanning out. That false confidence held until the lead armor triggered a massive anti-tank mine buried under the dirt track. The blast tossed the point tank, completely gutted the hull, and sent a raging fireball blowing out the turret ring instantly. Surviving crew members bailed out immediately, leaving their burning rig to completely block the only viable assault route into the zone. Right behind it, the lead troop carrier slammed the brakes, throwing it into reverse, while trailing drivers panicked, caught between punching the gas or falling back. That fatal hesitation paralyzed the entire scout column in a brutal choke point. A burning wreck trapped them ahead, chaos choked the rear. The second that hostile convoy stopped dead in the kill box, Ukrainian artillery teams stopped guessing. They knew exactly where to strike. Heavy artillery batteries that previously dialed that very dirt road answered the radio call, dropping a devastating, tight bracket of high-explosive rounds right onto the parked convoy. Artillery shells hammered the adjacent tree line and bracketed the trapped troop transports, while shrapnel shredded tires, snapped armor tracks, and cut down exposed infantrymen. The defensive minefield did its job freezing the spearhead. Now, this heavy barrage of falling steel was finishing off exactly what the explosives started. In a matter of minutes, the entire recon element sent to test the defenses was totally neutralized, stripped of both its combat power and its armor. While Russian wrecks burned out on the frontline approach, Ukrainian drone pilots stared right through the smoke, locking eyes on a massive mechanized reinforcement column advancing from the rear. An Overwatch drone punched higher into the sky, scanning the main logistics artery, and spotted a heavy Russian battalion stretching miles back down the exact same fatal road. Target coordinates and ranging data flashed in real time straight to the closest firebase. Those gunners immediately loaded a totally different, far deadlier payload for the strike. They pulled cluster munitions. Why? Because the inbound hostile armor was bunched up tight, with zero room to disperse on that narrow choke point. The initial airbursts rained deadly submunitions straight down over the convoy, and a Vanguard battle tank caught a direct hit. The explosion forced every driver behind it to jam their brakes and swerve wildly. Those brutal first impacts shattered the Russian formation long before they could launch their assault. More importantly, it bought vital minutes for Ukrainian mechanized infantry units to rush the grid. Bradley fighting vehicles seized that tactical window. They pushed aggressively into firing positions, unloading fresh combat squads right onto the zero line. Those Bradleys deployed fire teams who immediately flooded the trench network, dug in anti-tank missile posts, and locked their comms straight to the aerial drone teams steering the artillery. The Bradley cannons and heavy machine guns dumped massive suppressing fire down the road, completely pinning the Russian crews desperately trying to survive the cluster barrage. While this went down, Russian brass made a fatal tactical blunder. They sent troop carriers forward to act as meat shield minesweepers, completely ignoring the need for heavy combat engineers. Every single transport that blew a mine or caught a rocket jammed the road further. They became giant, burning roadblocks, killing their own momentum. And you can see the result. This frontline corridor became a mangled graveyard of steel, permanently choking every single massive assault that followed. Listen up. Russian commanders didn't halt after first contact. The intel shows they actually believed pushing more armor down these routes would break the line. Hostile mechanized columns pushed down multiple axes simultaneously, with each vanguard trying every tactical trick in the book just to survive. Some Russian tank crews drove in weaving patterns, swerving hard left and right to throw off the gunners and frontline drone operators. They dropped smoke shells to build massive gray screens along the advance, hoping the aerial surveillance would lose their thermal signatures in the haze. A handful of formations actually breached that first minefield belt, pushing straight into the final open kill zone just short of the main trenches. That last strip of dirt might look like a clean sprint on the drone feeds, but tactically, it was the most exposed sector of their entire assault route. We had total overwatch. Every single maneuver was tracked, meaning the true brutal test of this Russian offensive was only just kicking off. Ukrainian forces engineered a deeply layered defensive grid right here, with every layer purpose built to trap vehicles the second they stalled. Dense minefields forced heavy armor to bottleneck onto tight tracks, entirely stripping those tanks and troop carriers of their tactical spacing and momentum. The moment a hostile platform halted to dodge a Pace's partisans, crater or flaming wreck, it became a static target for guided munitions out of the prepared dugouts. Anti-tank detachments, packing top-attack javelins, simply waited for those enemy silhouettes to cross into the pre-sighted kill boxes. Ukrainian artillery batteries hammered road junctions and tree lines with timed salvos, while FPV strike drones hunted down any stray machine trying to bypass the blocked bottlenecks. Under that withering fire, multiple Russian crews panicked and abandoned fully functional platforms just short of the trench lines, seeing zero safe paths forward. Those empty rigs and burning hulks immediately became new roadblocks, choking the operational pathways even tighter for every subsequent mechanized wave moving up. My tactical assessment shows Moscow committed elements of at least 2 brigades here, dumping over 100 armored platforms straight into this specific axis. Their doctrine was obvious: use sheer mass and relentless repetition to shatter the forward shields. But Russian casualties spiked massively before their vanguard ever sniffed the secondary defensive belts. Dozens of main battle tanks and troop transports were neutralized or abandoned across a ridiculously tight tactical footprint, with half of them never firing a single effective shot. Look at this closely with me. This slaughter wasn't caused by one magic bullet. It happened because of how seamlessly the Ukrainian combined arms defensive grid operated. Anti-armor mines pinned the targets down, cluster munitions shredded the jammed-up convoys, and agile FPV drones executed any crippled hostile rigs that tried to reverse out. Allied Leopard tanks and Bradley fighting vehicles poured punishing fire from the flanks, transforming this entire open sector into a sealed-off slaughterhouse right at the perimeter. With the outer barricade already extracting such a catastrophic toll, the battle space was primed for pure carnage, the moment fresh Russian assault companies tried to ram their way down that exact same bloodied corridor. Modern warfare on this front relies on a brutal kill chain. These systems link together to systematically wipe out every high-value target in the enemy formation, piece by piece. During one heavy offensive push, a mixed hostiles column led by a main battle tank, an MTLB ammo carrier, and multiple armored transports rolled into the open, right after Russian artillery pounded the lines and popped smoke screens. On the satellite feed, it looked like a textbook Soviet-era mechanized thrust. But cutting through the smoke, a Ukrainian recon drone painted their every move, feeding real-time coordinates to the missile squads waiting in ambush. The javelin gunner took the targeting package, locked onto the glowing thermal signature of the lead tank, and launched a top-attack missile straight down into the fragile roof armor above the turret. That warhead punched right through the steel. Massive flames erupted. We watched the surviving crew bail out of the burning wreck, sprinting toward their MTLB ammo carrier, praying it could evacuate them. Seconds later, a friendly tank-firing drone guided indirect arcs slammed rounds straight into that MTLB hull. That rig was loaded to the brim with shells and propellants for the trailing vanguard. The impact vaporized the support machine instantly. Massive secondary detonations rocked the drone feed. Both the crippled battle tank and the blazing ammo carrier were completely wiped off the board within minutes. That quick tactical exchange proves how the tip of the kill chain deliberately targets the enemy spearhead and its critical mobile supply line. Think about it. Once those lead pieces are neutralized, the entire forward assault group rapidly shatters. The moment the anti-armor missiles and tank rounds finish their job, the next echelon of defensive weapons deployed to exploit the absolute chaos in the hostile ranks. Ukrainian artillery immediately switched to devastating cluster munitions, unleashing a brutal spread of cluster munitions across the route and surrounding cover, shredding infantry squads desperately scrambling from their vehicles to find hard cover. Simultaneously, tactical drones loitered above, dropping high explosive charges right onto stalled armor. They specifically targeted exposed engine decks, open hatches, and any spot where crews might mount repairs or escape. Then, low-flying, first-person view-strike platforms screamed into the kill zone, steered by operators monitoring live combat feeds, and slammed right into surviving tanks and mechanized carriers still holding power or active guns, striking ammo trucks, mobile command centers, and troop transports in rapid, brutal succession. This combined arms barrage of artillery and drone strikes triggered secondary internal explosions, spreading a raging fire between every crippled machine. In minutes, what began as a highly organized, mechanized assault devolved into a burning graveyard of mangled steel and scattered infantry. The entire assault force lost the combat mass and tactical cohesion required to punch through the main Ukrainian defensive strongholds. You and I are seeing this layered kinetic strategy move far beyond open terrain, because defenders unleashed the exact same brutal tactics when Russian armor attempted pushing into urban hubs and smaller rural settlements. Look at the intense combat around a recent village. The Azov Brigade was tasked with holding a tight choke point running straight through farmland and low residential buildings. Russian officers pushed two heavy armored personnel carriers out ahead of the main assault group, gambling these units, could blitz the outskirts, deploy dismounted infantry, and establish a tactical foothold inside. A lethal mix of blocked terrain, pinpoint anti-armor fire, and ruthless drone strikes halted that breakthrough dead at the town limits. Their desperate bid to capture a streethead shattered completely before Russian troops could even begin digging in. Brutal clashes at these small junctions reveal exactly why subsequent armored thrusts drove straight into highly orchestrated, zeroed-in kill zones. And it explains why every fresh assault had to grind across terrain already choked with the burnt wreckage of previous tactical failures. Russian mechanized offensives in this specific sector quickly devolved into a predictable, highly fatal tactical loop. Combat elements staged with heavy tanks in Dasho, the vanguard and carriers trailing, advancing down corridors perfectly mapped by Ukrainian artillery spotters. Lead vehicles detonated anti-tank mines practically the second they rolled out of their forward assembly points. Others pushed deeper down the approach vectors before massive blasts shattered their tracks and road wheels. Let's break this tactical nightmare down together. Once heavy armor stalled in these zones, it became a fixed target for aerial hunters and dialed-in artillery fire points. Kamikaze drones plummeted into paralyzed tanks, while unmanned quadcopters precisely dropped explosives right onto vulnerable engine decks. Then, heavy ground artillery systematically erased any armored target that still twitched or showed forward movement. During countless runs, assault crews never even saw their objective. The killing blows were always delivered miles short of the primary Ukrainian defensive trenches. This meat grinder dictated every subsequent operation on that axis. The identical ruthless battlefield logic awaited any unit trying to inch closer to Ukrainian lines. Because the lethal traps absolutely did not end with that initial minefield. Desperate tank commanders tried gunning it through the red zone to hit stable ground, but they were forced to navigate around flaming wrecks and massive craters with zero maneuverability. Infantry carriers blindly followed them through those exact same narrow bottlenecks, and one tiny driving error shoved them straight into fresh minefields, triggering explosions that permanently blocked the path for the column behind them. Heavy cluster munitions and precision-guided shells immediately pounded those highly congested transit routes, magnifying the carnage exponentially as jagged shrapnel ricocheted between vehicles jammed nose to tail. Entire mechanized columns were shredded to pieces before firing a single planned volley at defending forces, forcing surviving crews into a brutal choice burn in place, or risk sprinting down escape routes packed with identical hazards. Those frantic, split-second calls under heavy barrage made this slaughter even worse, since fleeing the strike zone was frequently just as fatal as entering it. Field officers fully realized every evacuation order guaranteed losing more hardware. Falling back offered exactly zero safety. The withdrawal corridors behind them were already meticulously rigged for devastation. The moment retreat orders came, panicked drivers attempted reversing or pivoting their treads in suffocatingly tight spots, and pure chaos infected the ranks as thick smoke, dirt, and flaming diesel obscured the safe lanes. Blinded carriers reversed right into secondary mine belts, explicitly planted to destroy backup waves. Others swerved desperately into the tree lines, directly into ambushes, hidden explosives, and spotters waiting for movement. First-person view hunter-killer platforms actively chased down fleeing transports, skimming those exact tracks, plunging directly into open hatches or thin roof plates, a brutal reality we must study. Time and again, an armored personnel carrier that thought it broke contact would just detonate in a fireball hundreds of yards down the highway, a guided warhead hunting it down from the rear, yard by bloody yard. Tactical failures turned this entire approach vector into a scrapyard, burned-out Russian hulls littering the fields, the roads, the ditches. That graveyard of armor right there? That is exactly why you and I need to analyze why these mechanized assaults keep collapsing. Russian heavy armor pushes on this front line keep disintegrating. There are fatal tactical flaws hardwired into how Moscow is fighting this brutal conflict. Hostile units are rolling heavy columns right into the kill zone, while Ukrainian reconnaissance feeds are already tracking them from every altitude. And yet, we are seeing zero coordinated effort to jam or blind those surveillance sensors. Sure, air defense batteries take shots at incoming threats, but there is absolutely no systematic sweep clearing the airspace, or hunting the enemy operators guiding these lethal strike platforms. Combat engineers are also critically short here. Specialized breaching vehicles are practically ghosts on this front. Standard troop carriers get forced into frontline roles they simply cannot survive. To make it worse, command forces them forward, even when assault routes are compromised. What should be fluid tactical maneuvers become suicidal, slow-motion drives straight into dialed-in artillery zones. Stack these failures up, and every attempted breakthrough just becomes a morbid stress test. How much raw steel and infantry is Russian command willing to burn in one sector? Over on the defending side, Ukrainian forces execute a completely different doctrine. They are setting up a modernized, multi-layered kill web. It dismantles any hostile armored formation that rolls into the zone, step by bloody step. Anti-tank mine belts aren't just dropped to halt armor. They are engineered to funnel convoys into tight fatal funnels under constant drone surveillance. The second those targets hit the brakes or bunch up in those lanes, unmanned reconnaissance birds beam exact grid coordinates and timing data straight to friendly artillery batteries. Cluster munitions immediately rain down on those jammed-up choke points. Precision-guided shells hunt the stragglers, while infantry with javelin missiles strike top-down from angles that Soviet-era armor doctrine never even planned for. Low-altitude strike drones and explosive payloads then swarm in to execute the crippled vehicles. Operators deliberately hunt ammo trucks, mobile command centers, or lead elements keeping the assault formation intact. By letting every weapon system chew up a weakened piece of the column, this integrated strike network shatters the offensive without requiring massive troop deployments in the forward trenches. The combat result? Massive armored pushes built on Cold War tactical doctrine are slamming into a modern battle space ruled by cheap optics and devastating remote firepower. Let's analyze this. Massed battalions relying on speed and thick plating now operate under 24/7 surveillance. One stop turns them into sitting ducks for the next drone swarm. For foreign defense ministries, whether they run NATO gear or Soviet export hardware, the brutal takeaway is this. Raw armor won't save outdated doctrine when the airspace above is swarming with weaponized microdrones. Armies failing to deploy robust unmanned assets and heavy combat engineering units, alongside layered anti-air defense screens, are begging to see their own advance routes choked with burning wreckage. Military academies and strategic command must treat this frontline footage as the new operational baseline, not an anomaly. Proving grounds need immediate doctrinal updates. Officers must drill for non-stop aerial harassment instead of pretending the skies are clear. If command ignores these hard lessons, our future tank crews will be rolling into combat, executing battle plans that are already lethally obsolete. The absolute slaughter unfolding in this sector is way more than a local tactical defeat. It forces a brutal reckoning for every single military force preparing to push heavy armored columns into grids where the cameras and killer drones never sleep. Stick with me here. This operation proves how a massive mechanized offensive completely shatters when advancing into pre-mapped, heavily mined, and constantly monitored terrain. The invading commanders committed battalion-level elements with heavy armor and support. But most of those assets never even sniffed the primary trench lines. They were neutralized, pinned down, and then systematically eradicated by sequenced fire. Spearhead elements that were supposed to punch a clean corridor just became a blazing trail of scrap. That brutal transition from a lethal strike force into dead, smoking steel is the ultimate headline tonight. When 2 entire brigades and over 100 combat platforms get lured into this exact kill zone, it is no longer just bad intel. It becomes a massive flashing red warning light about the fundamental architecture of modern mechanized warfare. This tactical disaster echoes way past this specific front line. It is a wake-up call to any global command that still relies on tight armored formations to breach contested ground. Weaponized consumer drones, precision strikes, and hidden minefields are synchronizing. We are watching this brutal cocktail absolutely shred heavy armor that old war manuals called completely invincible. The urgent question now is whether heavyweights from Moscow to Washington can rewrite their battle tactics fast enough by aggressively dispersing their frontline troops, deploying heavy active defense systems, and pouring massive funding into unmanned attack fleets and low-altitude air defense. If high command hesitates, tomorrow's assaults will hit the exact same meat grinder. That legendary armored spearhead is just going to keep dying as miles of charred steel across every new battlefield. Tracking fresh intel? You and I will unpack how Ukrainian squads wire their drone strike and artillery networks, and how Western generals analyze this blood-soaked data to overhaul heavy tank maneuvers, frontline infantry, and mobile defense grids. If you want hard truths on active combat zones, next-gen firepower, and the high-stakes politics driving it all, hit like, share this briefing, and subscribe to Military Force so you stay locked in for the next Combat Zone Citrep.